And at that time, I found the Gruit Day homepage.
Okay, something. 1 second.
Okay. Colleagues. So it's a little bit strange if you hear yourself 1 minute ago.
Okay, I think that might have been my.
Normally? Yeah.
1 second, everybody. I think I caused all that confusion there.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're back to normal. That was me. My apologies.
So let's try again. And yes, 2 years ago, I've seen that the colleagues from Canada stopped their project and the Gruit Day page. And for me, it was a pity that this idea should vanish. So we took it over and established a new Gruit Day page, which started 1 year ago. Until now, we have 22 or 23 breweries from all over the world who are presented on the page, who brew Gruit beers, who have events at International Gruit Day or other activities around Gruit beer. It will be interesting how it goes on. When they stopped their Gruit Day project, both brewery had around 50 or 60 breweries joining that project, celebrating Gruit Day. So I hope during the next years there are some more breweries on the page, some more breweries connecting each other with that idea.
Okay. No, it sounds like yeah, it's still kind of early days in a way. So yeah, it's interesting. But maybe we can go back before we kind of discuss what your experiences are with brewing Gruits. Jeez, that's a hard thing to say, actually. Didn't realize it would be so hard to say. But maybe we can just define what is a Gruit and where the term comes from, because as I understand it, the term is a very localized, very kind of Netherlands, Southern German term for very historical reasons.
Well, if you want to define a beer style, you always have hard work. If you want to have a close definition, you should say a region and a time, because styles change from different decades or centuries. They change from different reasons, regions, not reasons. So it's difficult to define. Of course, in my master thesis, it was one of the first points I had to find a definition. I read many articles, books, internet pages, and so on. And finally, I decided to have, in some way, an open definition to catch historical beers, to catch modern ideas of Gruit beer. And so I decided to the definition that a Gruit beer contains, instead of hops or additional to hops, some spice or herbs, something what gives it taste. And this needs to be, yes, it needs to be natural. So Gruit beer can also be beer with, for example, barks or anything natural that gives it taste.
Okay, so that's kind of maybe that's quite a broad definition then.
Yes,
right.
I know. It was also one of the critical points when we discussed about the thesis. But if you do it more close, you always have to kick somebody out.
Yeah, but is it? I mean, you mentioned this to me in an email, Simonis, that Gruits, like what are termed Gruits now, were pretty much all beer up to, I think it's around the 13th century or something. Hops only really came in then.
I just mentioned that, that beer was in the medieval ages. It was much different comparing to nowadays, and that the form of nowadays beer become such a beer like just in the end of medieval times, with when the beer started to be exported, when they started to use the hops to as a conservatives, and this is why the beer started become like a trade, part of the trade, and that is why hops became dominant of these conservatives and so on. So when the beer was very local, it was no need to use the hops, and you could use any herbs and so on. So that's the idea why the hops started to be dominant.
Right, because like I guess I'm just trying to understand where it came from that, you know, hops became the dominant, because obviously like the German purity laws specify hops. And was that part of the reason, that just because that led to hops being being necessary, or and then ruling everything out, or was it because hops are just easier to work with, or do they have special kind of, you know, special features that maybe some of the other herbs don't have?
I just wanted to say that when the beer was very local and was brewed for local communities, so it was like there was no need to brew it and to take care much of the shelf time. So the hops, the best conservative, natural conservative preservatives for a beer. So when the beer become the part of the trade, and how to say, we started to exporting it to other countries, so we need to find some preservatives which kept better kept the beer, increases the shelf time. So when the hops became dominant herb in the beer, and before this, in the medieval times, in the early medieval times, there was no need to keep it long, because it was consumed as very, very quickly after the brewing.
Right. So does that match up with what you're seeing, Max? But that people were basically just brewing their own beer, they were drinking it, so it didn't matter what there was no need to preserve it, basically.
Of course, it's a point. The hops really have beautiful effects on the beer, concerning not only taste but also shelf life. That's a big point, anyway. On the other hand, there are also other herbs that could do the work as a preservative. But of course, the purity law is a big role anyway. It was a matter, of course, to keep good quality of the beer, but also to control the raw materials. And for this, it was a big point for the Bavarian Herzog to control the raw materials and also the taxes with it. And this control he gained by the purity law. So afterwards, it went on to whole Germany. Of course, not in the other part of the world. But if you look at the time where beer, especially lager beer, spread over the world, it was in the second half of 19th century. And this was exactly the time where you had the biggest breweries in Bavaria, where very important inventions like the cooling machine have been made in Bavaria. So a lot of technique, a lot of beer was exported from Bavaria all over the world. And of course, they took hops with them.
Right. So just to clarify for me, so the timeline is basically most of the world, and I suppose we're just talking about Europe because I don't know, brewing traditions in say South America or Africa really, but even just looking at Europe, so hops were kind of imposed as a taxation method through the purity law, and then that was enforced in Germany, and then, as you say, it maybe kept. Well, hops maybe never became as dominant outside of the whole maybe German and lowlands area for a while, but it was as commercialization, then just as the big breweries became the big breweries, they just kind of dominated. Because I remember something in, I think it was in Lars Garschol's book about, farmhouse brewing and that, and I don't know if you've read it, but he mentions something, and I just remember from memory, but that hops were just so easy as a plant that most farmhouses just had a small little hop garden, and it was so easy for them to use that it just grew, and they didn't have to tend it or anything. It just, went out and just picked a few hops every now and then, because they didn't need a very heavily hopped beer, I guess.
Another interesting point I also found during my research about Gruit Beer is that it was also a matter of money, a matter of power. Maybe together with the right to produce Gruit, you also had the right to take Gruit tax.
Okay.
And it was a very large income, especially for the church, for the medieval cities, and very often the president of the church was also the mayor of the city or the dominant person in the city. So they controlled really quite a lot money about that Gruit tax.
Okay, so each city had their own basic Gruit that they used.
In every city you had a Gruit house, and that was the only place where it was allowed to produce Gruit.
Okay.
And when they sold it, they also took a lot of tax. In many cities like Cologne or Münster, Trier, also in the Netherlands or in Belgium, in medieval ages, they had maybe 1/4, 1/3 of the complete tax they had in the city came from Gruit.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
Marcus,
really, that's a lot.
Marcus, sorry, it's an interesting question. Was it like the same tax as you would put on a beer, or it was a different tax?
Somehow it was the same.
Mm-hmm.
Only in former times you took the tax for the raw materials, and now you take it for the product.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just somewhere different
But
in the.
It's the same connection to get tax out of beer.
And so was the purity law?
Now we have the interesting point. At that age where the purity law was coming in 1516, you also had a fight between the big people of the church and of the earls and lords and other important people for power, and of course also for money. And when he established the purity law, the Bavarian Herzog cut that Gruit tax before it went to the church. And with the purity law, it went to him.
Oh.
So in some way, they used that purity law to break the power of the church.
Okay, and did they have a monopoly on growing the hops then, or could farmers sell and then they only had one place to sell it to, or how did they control the hops then?
Yeah, it's always an interesting question. How can you control it? For sure, they couldn't control it 100%. But on the other hand, if you produce malt or hops commercially in a larger scale, you can't do it for a longer time without being seen.
Okay.
So for sure they couldn't control it 100%, but on the other hand, for sure they controlled it.
Right. So yeah,
because it was a real matter of money and power.
So that the local farmers could grow their own little bit, but nobody really cared. But yeah, if you were doing it commercially, they wanted the bit that they wanted their
share. They had a monopoly, but that was not in connection with Gruit, was wheat beer.
Okay.
The Bavarian earls, herzogs had a monopoly to produce wheat beer. And for them, it was really a money-producing machine because people liked wheat beer a lot at that time. And every wheat beer they sold, it filled the cash desk of the Bavarian Herzog.
Okay. So then after the purity laws came in, like we said, the around German influenced areas, hops were the only option in beers, but it probably remained, Gruits probably remained popular and, brewed by farmhouses elsewhere.
For sure, Gruit beer remained popular for a longer time. The purity law first we had just in Bavaria. Of course, it's a big part of Germany, but it's only one part of Germany. And it was, I think, in 1918, so just 104 years ago, that we have it in whole Germany.
All right.
So until 1918, at least theoretically, you could produce Gruit beer or any other things. And we know from cities like Münster and others that Gruit beers have been produced after the purity law in 16th, 17th, or maybe also in younger ages. But yes, purity law is not as old and as complete as many people think.
Yeah, it's a nice marketing ploy, but it's not as pure as the marketing would have you believe.
Well, of course, the German brewers are not very interested in anybody criticizing the purity law. So all these stories in Germany and also among my colleagues are, yes, they don't like it if I speak about it.
And how about you, Stoijo? What's I don't know what brewing tradition there is down in Bulgaria. Is it like wine would have been a factor, but I don't know how much so where would first of all, where would brewing have stood in Bulgaria as a kind of a regional thing? And then was Gruit kind of naturally part of that, or because it would have been pretty much out of German influence for a long time, I guess?
Well, actually, Bulgaria is typically a wine country. Yeah, at the end of the day, after all, where you can grow wine or grapes, it's usually a perfect place for growing hops. Actually, the brewing tradition in Bulgaria, like commercially brewing, it all started maybe in the middle of the 19th century. So we joined up the party pretty late. But wines were produced like ages before that. Well, our brewing tradition actually is coming from Germany and from Czech Republic. So there were entrepreneurs and during the Industrial Revolution in 19th century. The entrepreneurs saw the opportunity to build breweries in Bulgaria, so it's actually not something commonly known ages ago.
Okay, so when brewing did start, it started with hops.
It started with hops, yeah, that's right.
Else.
Well, we were the first brewery actually in Bulgaria to commercially brew as a collaboration with Landsteiner, a Gruit Beer. Although Homebrewers, yeah, that's the second edition. Although Homebrewers actually experiment with different herbs, experiment with wild hops, because we have loads of wild hops here in Bulgaria. You can actually see like plantations of acres in the woods. like wild hops. So yeah, as home brewing started actually in 2012. 2012. Here in Bulgaria, there were like lots of homebrewers who were trying to experiment with different herbs and hops, included wild hops.
Okay. And similar to that brings me back around to you, I suppose, like, because I don't know if you're familiar, but Lithuania has retained a very strong farmhouse brewing tradition, and like lots of really interesting brewers there, lots of little people who just very locally, and lots of techniques that don't seem to exist anywhere else. So did they keep, like, hops obviously came involved in that, but was Gruit still a tradition among those farmhouse brewers?
So in Lithuania, we still have, as you mentioned, very different techniques for brewing, and we still have a live tradition to brew with herbs. So this tradition is, you know that this traditional Lithuanian farmhouse beer is raw beer, not boiled. So many brewers put a lot of herbs, different herbs, in the bottom of the filter. So when you're lautering it, so it becomes infused with these herbs. And for example, it's very popular to put like juniper branches or birch leaves or mugwort. So these herbs is most popular. And if there is not a good but the bittering, the main bittering herb is actually hop. But in the case, if you want to increase the bitterness, or if the harvest of the hops was bad, so they use to boil in a hop tea also other herbs such as like mugwort, or even using tree barks. For example, aspen tree, if you know, it's in English. So aspen bark. So these herbs and barks used for bittering.
Okay, and sorry, Marcus, you were going to ask something there, were you?
Yes, is it the same what they call sahti in Finland?
No, it's sahti is different beer, but it's very very similar to the Finnish beer sahti, but the brewers have their own mixes of the herbs, so they could use juniper. Other brewer can use mugwort or yarrow or other herbs. So even fresh hay, we use the fresh hay. Just pick in the summer, when brewing in the summer, we pick the just herbs, and don't look what herb, we just cut it and then put it in the lauterton in the
So
bottom.
it's a little bit like historical Gruit beer brewing. Everybody uses what he has.
Yeah. So I think that the idea of these Gruits are just to use everything from the nature what surrounds you, so you can just feel and every brewer has their own view what the herbs to use. So it's like the secrets of the brewer.
And are they passed down then from generation to generation, that each farmhouse would have their own?
Yeah, but these brewers starting to brew nowadays more modern way. So this tradition is like passing away, but it's still alive.
Yeah. Excuse me. So yeah, and that actually, you mentioned hop tea there. So one of the things that I'm wondering about the brewing with the herbs and that is do they pick deliberately bitter? Like, is it meant to replace the bittering of the hops, or to do the same purpose, or is it for flavors, or where do you pick up what herbs to use?
I have read a lot about this, and this question is also was interesting for me. But in earlier times we use I thought one of the idea why we use a lot of herbs and to improve the taste of the beer. Actually, we in earlier times we use not the best the grains. So I think the taste of of we wanted to improve the taste of the beer, and actually also people thought what they didn't know about alcohol. How to say? They thought that the herbs also influence of the strongness of the beer.
All right.
So we thought if we put much, even the people say that it's the beer is very strong because you added too much hops or too much other herbs. So the herbs actually also have like the role of not only the bittering or shelf time, but also the strengthness of the beer.
Okay, that's a new one. I didn't know that. That was, at least in people's minds, obviously isn't a factor in reality. But
yeah, but it's when we think in a modern way, when we know that the beer contains alcohol and so on. So it's hard for us to understand that.
Yes, but I mean that brings me around. I mean, modern beers have, craft beers particularly, they've obviously become very, very, very hoppy. But other, like, traditional beers wouldn't have been. Traditional Gruits and traditional beers wouldn't have been as full of hops as, say, a modern triple hopped West Coast IPA.
Yeah.
So would flavor have been more of a, like, the flavor of the herbs would have come through a lot more then?
Yeah, and actually the herbs brings not only the flavor, but also we have the other, like it is we have intoxication in other ways, not only like alcohol, but if you know, it's the hops may decreases your your I can't explain it in English, but
your creativity.
Yeah. No, not creativity, but your in
awakeness.
Yeah. So
all right, sleep.
So it's the herbs brings not only the taste but also in other way of intoxication. So I want.
And then just Marcus and Deutsche, I mean, is that what appeals to you about Gruits? Is it the tradition, the kind of the romanticism of it, or is it you just like playing around with the different flavors, or have you just got tired of playing with the same hops all the time, or what led you to be so interested in it?
Well, let me start because actually Marcus was the person who inspired this, I may say, fascination of towards Gruits. Me personally, I like trying different combinations. We are actually just now we are including in our core beers portfolio a beer which is like a sort of hazy IPA. But for bittering, we are using only tribus herbs, which are very bitter. And after that, in Whirlpool, we are using a Sideritis tea, and then we are dry hopping with American style hops. So it's kind of a strange combination, and That's yeah, but it works like a charm, really. I mean, you wouldn't normally combine tea, bittering herb, and hops, for example. But at the end of the day, hops are really a herb which is bittering and it's very aromatic. So and also these two herbs we're using, the Sideritis and the Tribulus, these are immunoboosters, and they're also driving up the libido.
So I didn't really understand the third one. It was hops, Sideritis, and
Tribulus.
Never heard about this. I
Yeah.
need to know the German word.
Well, this is the Latin word. I don't know what the German word is.
Tribus.
Tribulus.
Okay, I will look that up.
It's used as an extract of this herb is used in Viagra.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
So we can say it's a man-made beer.
And I mean, Marcus, you've, as I understand it, like in the brewery, you're pretty much like Dundulis. You do a lot of traditional old styles. That's what your real focus is on.
Yes, really. On one hand, we like it to reactivate, so to say, traditional styles. On the other hand, there are not many breweries in Germany doing like this. So for us, it's also a little chance to get a market. To find the right herbs was an interesting way up to now. First of all, we were thinking about using the same herbs like in medieval ages, but the main herbs in former times have been pors and mugwort, and Simonas just told us that they have also a kind of toxic effect. So maybe it's not good and also not allowed to use them today. So we looked for some other herbs we find in old recipes and also in our region. And we started with a Gruit beer with juniper, sage, and peppermint. It was an interesting idea. It got a gold medal at Craft Beer Award, but it was not really easy to drink. And that's important too. If people don't like to drink it.
Yeah.
So we made a new start 2 years ago together with the university in Trier. They have one institute for beverage technology, and we had a bachelor thesis about Gruit beer. And then we took another idea, not to be historic, just to be tasteful. And in a lot of experiments, it was really exhausting. We tried different herbs in different concentrations and combinations. And finally, we took the beer that people accepted most. And this is a combination of lemongrass and anise for aroma and rosemary for bitterness. So this was the second idea, to use a combination of 3 herbs, 2 of them for aroma and 1 for bitterness, so to say, to take the role of hops. And then, of course, I had a third idea, which has been fascinating 2 times, to ask Stoicho. I don't know how you do it, but you have a real good hand in choosing the right herbs for beer. The first beer we made had a really good combination, and this one, it was the second one. It's a combination of cinnamon, basil, and Jubica. Yeah, in German and in Bulgarian I know, but in English I don't know.
I don't. Well, it's very close to thyme as an aroma, but it's something totally different, and it's very local fruit. Actually, I don't know if it's grown abroad, outside of Bulgaria.
This was one reason to take it. It is very typical for Bulgaria.
I did just, if you don't mind, I'll just circle around here, just because I've just seen some of the comments and the questions here. So, yeah, I think Radu found the herb you were talking about there, Stoich, or the tribulus, and that it's causes liver damage when ingested at harmful dosages.
Same goes for beer.
Yeah, exactly. And Jeff here, I'll just show it. He has a question. I don't know if it kind of comes back around to what Simonis was saying there, that do some of the herbs have psychotropic effects that are different from the alcohol? What do you think? Like, does it? I assume some of them have the effects as kind of Simonis inferred.
Well, think of one herb which is a direct cousin of hops. So I guess
yeah. I wonder, do they? I suppose I don't know if you can phrase it this way, but kind of, are they complementary kind of effects, or does one kind of put you to sleep and the other wake you up? Can they have that sort of effect?
Balance each other out.
Actually, it's everything about amount. You need to use as less as possible of the herbs, because it's a bit dangerous to increase the amounts. We had such a rock festival, and one guy has just asked to brew Gruit Beer for this festival. And actually, in the festivals, the people drink a lot. So I just also read a lot about the juniper berries, and actually also we counted every berry in a liter because it's actually, you can eat just 10 berries of juniper per day, and because the great amounts will cause the damage of the liver also. So you need to count everything when you brew the Gruit. So you must care about amount of the herbs.
Is there any sort of, I suppose, regulation around it? Or, I mean, if you're out picking herbs, and I presume from the sound of it, most of you are actually going and picking them locally. You're not buying huge bulks of them. So is there any sort of regulation? Obviously, there's regulation on what you can put into food and things. How does that impact?
Yeah, there is a regulation. You need to have a patent for this, or how to say, or you need to buy these herbs from the people who have the permission to pick these herbs. So
the permission
in Lithuania. So you can't put just the herbs just wherever you want to pick it. Yeah.
Oh, right. You can't just go out and forage the herbs yourself.
Yeah, you can, but you need to get the permission from the government to have it to
Got it. Is that the same? Because I'm looking, actually, you have yours, this one, which is, I think it's got heather in it.
This is heather ale, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a nice one. It's just happened to have a couple of bottles of it there. That, and you had another one, which on my last order, that one as well. So they're two completely different beers. I mean, they don't taste anything alike. And I assume, though, that the base beer is much the same. Is it the same malts and things? Is it just purely the herbs that are deciding?
Yeah, it's different, very different herbs, because one of them is heather, and actually we have such a agreement with the national park we need to get rid of the heavers because we grow very very fast, and we need to cut it. So we go to this national park and cut it and bring it to our brewery and brew a beer. And this second beer was with the mugwort, with four different absinthes. So it's very very different one. It's all the bitterness. One is very mild in taste, and other is very bitter because of the mugwort.
And all the like, do you find that there's a certain style of beer that it works best with, like those, or is there something that you have to keep away with that you cannot make with the Gruits that you can make? Obviously, heavily hopped beers are out, but I mean, apart from that, is there any style that you have to keep away from certain types of yeast or certain types of malts that they don't work with, or is it wide open?
Yeah, we have an idea just to brew from the local stuff. So we just, if we use the herbs, so we use only the local, which grows in so this is just our idea, but actually, yeah, it's the brewing artists can use everything.
Is that the same for you, Max, that you try and keep it local, or is like, have you tried some beers? You said some beer didn't work. Was there some particular mix that you can say, I will never try that again, or I'll never use that? Or
There is some.
When we started brewing Gruit Beer, we again had this historic thought. We wanted to try to bring it close to the history. Of course, if it should be really close to the history, it would be sour. We needed to take smoked malt and everything like this. So finally, we chose that kind of our current beers, which is closest to our region, closest to history, as the basic beer, and of course also a beer with little content of hops. So that was the beer that we call obergärig, just top fermented. You can say it's a Kölsch, but of course we are not allowed to call it Kölsch. We are too far away from Cologne. So we used this beer, and then we put the herbs in it by dry gruiting, same like dry hopping. It works with different kind of herbs, and the rest is personal taste. Some people like this, some people like this. So yeah, we tested it together with our guests at tastings at the brewery to establish the herbs we have now.
Okay, yeah. So actually, we'll come up here because I have a question here as well. If there's a list of herbs, like, is there anywhere, any directory? I suppose Marcus, you'd be the person mainly keeping this. Is that, herbs that are commonly used in Gruits and the amounts to use? Are there anywhere people can go and look at those, or is it all very individualistic? Just
it's you can find that list in my master thesis according to traditional Gruits, but today everybody who is brewing Gruits does it according to his own requirements, to his own ideas. So and it also depends on the basic beer type, how much herbs, how much which amount to use to get a good taste. So it's very different. So sorry, there is no big list to look it up.
Okay, just look up. The one though that keeps coming across, I keep hearing, so is that you can pretty much be sure of, seems to have been used everywhere, is juniper, and I don't know, there was something else too, but yeah. But no, I think the answer to that is no. Everybody's just basically experimenting. There are traditional herbs and traditional stuff, but people also experiment with a lot of other things and just see how the combinations work. So here I'll ask another question. I don't know who. So Andrew here says he lives in a desert in the United States. Doesn't have a tradition of being brewed in beers, the local herbs, but many were in indigenous teas. And this question then is, how can he try and incorporate non-traditional herbs into Gruit? What should he be looking for that you think works, for a Gruit if there is no tradition of using those herbs? Stoicho, Marcus mentioned that you have a good eye for this sort of thing. So,
well, what I think is if it's good for a tea, it's good for beer. And from then on, we can like sort of try out different beer styles which goes with different herbs. I mean, it's kind of a reference to the previous question, whether we have beer styles which go well for Gruits or we don't. Well, there are certain herbs which are going very good with sweet beers, for example, like something with more caramel malts. And then on the other hand, we have some beers, some herbs which are going with drier styles. What we tried actually for our first collaboration with Marcus, it was a mixture of Melissa. I'm sure I'm gonna forget some of the herbs. It was Melissa, mint, sage. Marcus, help me out. Juniper, and one more.
A little hops and
yeah, one more herb.
It was 5 and a little hops.
Yeah, that's right. And what we did is we put loads of unique malt so that we made the beer very sweet, and it was counteracting with, for example, the aroma and the flavor. Or we put rosemary, I think, or thyme, one of the two. And actually, what we're usually looking for is kind of a go together attitude between herb and the beer style or the base beer. So what we usually experiment, we have kind of a style, a ready beer, which we think is going to work out with certain herbs. We make a tea of the herb. We usually make like sort of a juice between the beer and the tea, so that we can actually assess whether these aromas and these flavors coming from the herb are going to work out well with this certain beer style. So it's so kind of a think outside of the box and do a little bit of a mix and match opportunity and
right. So basically, don't be afraid to try something, but
never.
You can be pretty sure that if they were making it for local teas, then it's got the flavor and it's probably got bitterness, and it's worth trying.
Yeah,
fair enough. Actually, I had a question sent in. Actually, so do you think the herbs need to be antibacterial, or do they? Like that's one of the features of hops, like Simonis mentioned, to preserve them. I suppose if you're not shipping it commercially, you're just brewing it for yourself, you don't really need to worry about that aspect, do you?
Well, it's kind of I don't know. It's not none of the big of the macro breweries are actually doing beers with different herbs. There is a reason behind it. I mean, there are lots of microflora and microorganisms living in the herbs, especially if they haven't been treated in some way. So usually when we put herbs in beers, we do one of the two. We either put them in the boiler, or we dry gruit them, as Marcus said. When we dry gruit the beers, the herbs in beer, we usually don't sanitize or only. Sometimes we only put some kind of a hard liquor in the so that we can actually make some kind of a tincture of the herbs. But usually we're going with the flow and just try drinking beers.
Okay.
If we put it in the boiler, I mean, there is no problem.
Right, but yeah, that brings in, I suppose, the aspect of you're not throwing in a fermenter, so you're not really introducing wild yeast into the thing at all. No. And how about, actually, I think there was a question here, if I remember. Yeah. What's the advice on dried versus fresh, basically? Do you prefer dried? Do you prefer fresh? Does it make a difference?
Well, me personally, it's the same goes for cooking. If a herb has large leaves, like for example bay leaf or rosemary, it's good for drying. And actually, these kind of herbs, for me at least, have a better impact on the beer if they are dried. And for greens, I prefer greens put in the boiler. That's my personal preference, and
it's better to extract the taste from the dried herbs. So that's the dry herbs we use mostly.
Yeah.
So it's similar. So you take them, basically you're just using the dried ones when you want just the flavor, the aroma. It's not anything to do with the bitterness. It's just simply to add taste.
It's more efficient to use dried herbs.
Yeah, it's more efficient. Yes.
Okay.
More efficient and a little bit more safe, because when the herbs are dried, the risk to get some infection, some bacteria, some wild yeast in the beer is less.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, yeah. So I just want to bring this back around. So I mean, I think you've kind of answered this question, but I had it down as a specific thing I wanted to ask you. So when you're brewing a gruit, is there any difference, like where you'd put in the herbs and stuff compared to if you're brewing a triple IPA, for instance? Like, do you put it into the boil? Do you put it into the work? But where do you use them, or how do you decide which ones to use where, like in the brewing process? And I suppose then coming back to Simonis, like if you're not boiling at all, where do you use them?
No, in our brewery we boil the wort, but actually yes, we in a difference we usually prepare the water by infusing these herbs. For example, juniper, or even heather or birch leaves. So we make like a tea, and after this we brew with this water. So this is one of the ways we use in a brewing the herbs. We do not do this with hops, but also but you can use it like a bittering. So you use and boiling it, and you can use it like in whirlpool. These hops for the aroma. So actually, we do not do dry herbing, so because to avoid the bacteria.
Okay, and
up to now let's say different. When we began to try dry gruiting, dry herbing, however you can call it, we also had a bit fear about the bacteria, but up to now we never, instead of one or two kegs, we never had problems with infections. So maybe with the herbs it's a little bit like hops. All of the herbs, they have some antibacterial effect, and if you use it into combination, maybe it's a kind of stabilization as well. Okay. I think so, because we never had bigger problems with infections or anything like this.
Okay. Yeah, so just 1 second. I have another question here about maybe we can just leave this one to the end because you can give your website address and that then, Marcus. But it's about other brewers that are brewing Gruit. So we'll leave that one just for a second. I don't know if anyone else had any. Where do you see the whole area of Gruits? I mean, craft. Okay, we went from the macros. The craft have now taken a share of, small share, but still a growing share of the macro market. And it seems like that craft brewing, which started off primarily in the US as, very hop heavy and primarily based around hops and using, different blends of hops for flavoring and for bittering and that, it's splitting off a bit. And you're now getting like people more interested in, spontaneous fermentation, saisons, and now Gruits. Do you think, where's the market for it? It'll never be a world dominating market, but where do you see, like, are most of your beers going to be sold locally to particular individuals, particular people looking for something? Are you going to market it based on the kind of like I mentioned before, the romanticism, or are you doing it just for your own interest and it'll always be a tiny market?
I personally think that people are fed up with like drinking the same beers in the same beer styles. That's why IPAs, well, yeah, they are the biggest. They have the biggest sort of market share in terms of craft beer. But they are kind of shining down. That's why new types of IPAs are introduced, and that's why, for example, spontaneous fermented beers are coming up and are growing. That's why lambics and creeks and different kind of sours are growing, bread ales as well. And I think that Gruits are sort of like an interesting type of beer or beer style, if you wish, that can actually steal some of the hype going to sours, for example. And it's sold in the hands of like more known brands to make use of their better naming and branding. For example, Mikkeller, they brew a spontaneous fermented beer with basil, for example, which is widely unavailable, if you can say. It's very hard to find, but it's very well appreciated, and I think that's more commonly known craft beer brands. If they emphasize on different breweries, the style will grow.
Yeah, do you think the same, Marcus? Is that
yes? I think so too. Pale ale and IPA have maybe been so popular while it was the first style of craft beer brewers, which came all around the world. And of course, people are used to hops aroma.
Yeah.
And it's a big point. If people are used to drink something, to taste something, they normally like it more than anything else. But on the other hand, IPA, especially these extreme IPAs with a lot of aroma, a lot of bitterness, they are for freaks in some way, same like Gruit Beer. Gruit Beer is interesting because you can address totally different people, especially people who tell I don't like beer. If you give them a Gruit, they like it. And also with Deutscho, we have more and more people who like to experiment, who want to taste something new, something different. Wine lovers do it since decades. They experiment, try from different countries with different aroma, wood aged or not. And now we have the same with beer. People like to experiment. They see they can do it with beer as well, not only with other beverages. And so Gruit Beer is one way to have a beer to these people.
Right. So does that apply up in Lithuania then? Because again, like we mentioned, you know, Lithuania kept its own brewing culture and brewing traditions. So I guess that the kind of the whole heavily hopped is really only kind of sneaking in there in recent years. You managed to keep their own. Is it at risk? Is it, or do you think you can kind of, there will always be a market for it?
You mean about? I just haven't understand you. Maybe you can repeat it.
Well, I'm just saying that with like Gruits in Lithuania, like you've kept Lithuania managed to keep its own brewing traditions, and you've got totally unique beers like Captinus, and you've got raw ales being being widely available. So do you think that and Gruits fit into that? I guess like most of the raw ales that I know of though don't have like the Yovaru and people have, they don't brew Gruits as such. They use hops. So there's very few. You might be the only one who's actually brewing Gruits on a regular basis, on a kind of a commercial basis. So where do you see that that's going? Are you going to manage to keep it? Will it die out? Will it, do you think it's going to come back or grow or what?
I think people we are looking back to see something new, and I think this is idea to bring what we forgot from the past, and actually when we started to brew the Gruits, the people also, as Marcus mentioned, that some people didn't like I don't like the beer, but when we taste the Gruits, they say, oh, this is not a beer, this is something different, and this is like the Gruits for the people to meet other, to see the beer in our way, because I think the beer is very, very interesting product, and the Gruit is also the beer, just brewed with the herbs, not with the hops. So this is not a rule to brew with the hops. You can brew with the herbs. So.
Yeah, and do you think it's an opportunity for homebrewers to? It seems like it should be an opportunity for homebrewers to really experiment and.
Yeah, so in Lithuania we have a lot of homebrewers who are brewing and starting to brew the Gruits. So these tastes are very interesting for them. Yeah, but some people don't like the herbs, the taste of it, because it's for somebody it tastes like medicine or something like that. It reminds of medicine, or mixtures that we have to drink again from the flu. So,
yeah,
but yes, the Gruit is interesting thing, and it and you have plenty of herbs to experiment and combine it together, so you can make a lot of different tastes and.
Yeah, that just led me on to one more question. So, but like hops, obviously, I mean, pretty much the only purpose in hops is for beer, and it's it's a big commercial business out there. Like herbs should still be a more local thing. So if you're getting a Gruit, you really should probably going to be reflecting the local area as opposed to somebody picking hops out of a catalog, I guess. It's a way to reflect the local area a lot more kind of honestly.
Yeah, and actually we brew the Gruits like seasonal beers, and we put the same amount of herbs, and the people are like comparing with the previous year how it tastes. So you can feel how these herbs changes, and it depends on the year, on the summer. What was the summer? It was rainy or it was sunny. So you can feel the difference, and you can feel seasonal changes.
So yeah, it's a real like Marcus mentioned, it's real wine style. It's a real, that is the kind of the terroir of the thing, and depends. You'll have a different harvest from year to year, depending on what the weather was. Okay, sorry, we've got another one. I was thinking we were going to be finishing up, but do you have any general tips, since we mentioned homebrewers? Where should somebody start if they're a homebrewer, they're already brewing with hops? Where would you start? What would you advise them? Stoicho, do you want to grab at that for a second?
Well, actually start with something basic and something like more normal, so that you can actually enjoy it. I mean, start with the herb which you enjoy. For example, Melissa, lemongrass, they're quite straightforward. They're very easy herbs, both to deal with and to actually consume. They're not very overtaking the whole idea. So something like simple
and you're talking there about putting in addition to, say, a hop.
In like a pale ale or something like that, so that you can actually taste the herb. What you can also do is like do a Helles, for example. Use lager yeast, which is more neutral, and actually enjoy, and so that you can let the herb aromas and flavors stand out.
Okay. And so similar, but I mean, just bring it back, because you mentioned using infusions. Would that be a good way to start, or is it a very complicated way to start?
I don't know. It depends on the herb you use, because not all the herbs you can use the infusion, I think, because it's like when you are lautering through the malt, so many tastes left in the malt. So I think you need to if you start just to put it in the end of a boil to check the taste and to aroma. I don't know. It's and you do not use like as was mentioned, like to use a neutral yeast, and maybe the not a complex malt combination, but something simple.
Okay, and then just experiment from there. Okay, guys, look, we're getting late. I held you up. I'm just going to do two things here now. First, one is someone asked about the list of herbs. So or Radu here has something. I'll just show it up. She has a small link. Oh, you can't see it. So if anybody wants it, sorry, I thought I could show up let me just try this again. This link, if you want to just take note of it, it's tinyurl.com, Gruit -herb.art. And there's a list there that someone has. I don't know who. And finally, I have one question, and Marcus, I'm going to address this to you because it's a nice way to kind of finish up with what you're doing. And it's Scratch Brewing in Illinois. They use a lot of herbs and forage items. So what other breweries can you recommend? And I think you have the list basically is on your webpage.
Yes, I have. We have a growing list on gruitday.beer. Up to now, I think it's 20 or 21 breweries. I have another 2 or 3 to put on the list, and it's always growing. And you can also search for your favorite country or for your favorite herb, something like this. So if you are interested in Gruit beer, you have a good list of brewing beers, of Gruit beer brewing breweries. Oh, hard to speak.
That's hard to think.
That's a mouthful.
I have to drink that first when I try it again.
Okay, so that's gruitday.beer. And
yeah, gruitday.beer.
And it's growing, and I think, like I said, you have a list from across Europe and from the US, and I don't know
if you miss the address, the former address was gruitday.com. This address is still existing, but you will see the difference very quickly, because the company having the domain now, they are producing beds for the night.
Okay, That wouldn't be much use to anyone. So listen, guys, I think this was fun. It was hopefully informative for everybody watching, and I want to thank all of you for your time. Is there anything I missed out that I should have asked that I didn't ask that you really wanted me to ask about? Or nope. Nope, looks like not. So listen, thanks a million. It was great to have your time, and hopefully we'll encourage a few people to go out and try some Gruits. I have to go and find some from Stoicho and from Marcus. Like I said, I have a couple from Simonis here, which I'm enjoying as I speak, or in between speaking. So they're definitely worth trying out because, like I said, they're definitely not like your typical craft beer that you see everywhere. You can taste that there's a difference, and you can taste maybe not quite put your finger on what's in it, but that's what you learn as you try and drink the different ones. So what I'll just do is I'll just tell you next week we have another session. We have let me just finish it up. We have a session it's just going to be a brewers chat with Basqueland from Spain, hopefully from Ireland, and one I can't pronounce is Mashgas from Croatia. So they'll be coming along just to chat about their beers, chat about the beer scene there. Doesn't have a specific theme like this one, but if you want to just find out about brewing in those countries, I hope you'll come along and join in. I'm going to play a little video just to see us out, and I want to thank Simonis, thank you, Marcus, and Joe. Thanks a million for your time, and I'm going to keep this other one for Tuesday for International Gruit Day, and I'll open the other Dundulis Gruit on, and I'm sure you'll be having one as well. Okay, thanks a million, guys.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Thank you.